In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to use a recursive workflow to edit data in your database. And in this particular tutorial, I am going to show you how to edit the slugs of your data. So if you're familiar with Bubble, you will know that you have your user-generated fields, so fields you've created. Here I have first and last name, I have text, and then you have default fields that Bubble has created, which is created date, modified date, slug, and created by. Now, you can create workflows to automatically create a slug every time a new entry has been created. For example, if there's a new piece of data that's been added, you can create a workflow to automatically add a new slug. In my case, I had old data that didn't have slugs, and I needed to go back and add slugs to over 2,000 different items in my database, which if I did it manually would be extremely long. So we wanted to use a recursive workflow to actually do this. And a recursive workflow is a workflow that you use. A recursive workflow is a workflow where code invokes other code. So what we would do is from the back end, we would run some code that invokes another set of code to automate this process of adding the slugs. Hopefully this makes more sense shortly. So as you can see, I have names here, Alicia and Shanice. I'm actually going to change this just for the sake of this tutorial, just to show you how this works. I'm just going to say that as Dominic. And I'm going to say this one as London, this random name. So I saved the first and last as Dominic and London. And what you can see is the slug is the old names, Alicia and Shanice. And what I'm going to do to do this is use backend workflows. So backend workflows are workflows specifically for the backend to trigger different things in your database or different things that are going on in the backend of your Bubble application. So what I have here is an API workflow. I gave my API workflow a name. I'm triggering the workflow with post, and I added a key. This is a really important part, and you'll see as we create a new one shortly. So I added a key 100 days of no code, and 100 days of no code is the type. If I go back, this is just the type. This is just my data type. That's all that is. So if I go back, and then what we can actually see is the steps. So I have chosen the set a thing slug step, and the thing I want to change is 100 days of no code, and the slug I want to change is 100 days of no codes first last. And that's actually what I want to set the slug as. So if we go back, you can see right now these are different. The slug is Alicia and the first last name is Dominic. But we want the slug now to be Dominic, and we want this slug now to be London. And because we've already set up our workflow here, our API workflow, what we want to do is that recursive workflow I was talking about earlier is now I want to go to bulk, and I want to select my workflow that I want to run, which is called modify slug. And now we're going to call that modify slug code. So when we run the workflow, which should be really quick because there's only 2 entries, you can see it's Alicia and Shanice still, but if I just refresh my page, what you'll be able to see is now it's Dominic and London. For me, this is really important because we have company pages in one of my apps, and For over 2,000 entries, we didn't add a slug, and now we want to add a slug. For over 2,000 entries, we didn't add a slug, and now we want to add a customized slug, which is just the company's name. Jumping back to the workflows, I want to highlight how I got this API workflow. So when you're creating a new backend workflow, you'll just go to General, and then you go to New API Workflow. You name it, and you just get what you saw in my Modify Slug workflow. So that's my tutorial on how you use recursive workflows to change the slug in your data. So that's my tutorial on how to use recursive workflows to change the slugs of entries in your database in bulk.